Corsicana, Texas. Population about 25,000. The kind of town where people wave from their porches, where everybody's kid went to the same high school, and where, for over a century, one smell has drifted through downtown every winter. The smell of fruitcake, baking by the ton, at a company called Collins Street Bakery. On a July afternoon in 2013, a car nobody recognized pulled onto a street everybody did. It wasn't there for the fruitcake. By the time it was over, investigators would put a number on what had happened here. Somewhere north of $16 million. Missing, spent, gone. And the man they were looking for? He made about $50,000 a year. This isn't a story about a criminal genius. It's a story about what happens when trust replaces oversight, and about a man who spent 9 years quietly convincing himself he was owed what he was stealing. Collins Street Bakery has been in Corsicana since 1896. It's a family business, the kind that gets handed down instead of sold, and by the 2000s it was being run by Bob McNutt, part of the family that had kept it going for generations. It's the kind of company where loyalty means something, where a good employee isn't just staff, they're practically family. In 1998, a man named Sandy Jenkins came to work there. Over the years, he worked his way up and eventually landed the job that would define the rest of his life. Corporate controller. The person who keeps the books, who signs the checks, who tells everyone else what the numbers say. Here's the first thing worth sitting with. In a company like this, small, close-knit, built on relationships, Jenkins wasn't some outside hire with a badge and a background check everyone side-eyed. He was a known face, a neighbor, someone people had watched raise a family in this town. And that familiarity is exactly what let him operate without anyone looking twice at his work. In a bigger, more corporate company, someone in his position gets rotated, audited, double-checked as a matter of routine. In Corsicana, "We trust him" was the audit. And structurally, that trust had a very specific blind spot. As controller, Jenkins didn't just record the bakery's finances, he reconciled his own work. Nobody else double-checked the checks. The person watching the money was the only person watching the money. Bob McNutt ran this bakery the way a lot of small-town owners run their businesses, on relationships, not spreadsheets. He trusted his people because that's what you do in a town like this. What that meant, without anyone realizing it yet, is that the one employee with total access to the bakery's money was also the one employee nobody was checking. By most accounts, Jenkins was reliable, unremarkable, the kind of employee who never missed a filing deadline. But underneath that, colleagues and later reporting would describe someone who felt overlooked, someone who didn't quite fit in with the social world of small-town Corsicana, despite years there. Keep that in mind. It matters for what happens next. Sometime around December of 2004, Sandy Jenkins wrote a check to himself. Not authorized, not real. Just a number and a signature that wasn't supposed to be his to use. And then, nothing happened. No one noticed. No alarm went off. No auditor called. The books closed. The bakery kept selling fruitcake. Life went on. Here's the line worth remembering, because it's the whole point of this episode. Jenkins didn't write a second check right away. For a while, it seems, he just waited, watched, let the silence answer the question he'd been testing. And once he understood how easy it had been, that's when the real scheme started. This is the moment worth pausing on, because it's not really about greed yet. Not exactly. It's about a man who had spent years sitting at the center of a company's money, watching it move, watching it grow, watching all of it belong to somebody else, and who, in one quiet afternoon, started building a private argument in his own head. An argument that said, "I'm the one keeping this running. I'm the one nobody sees. I've earned more than what's in my paycheck. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to steal $16 million. They convince themselves, one check at a time, that they're not stealing at all, that they're collecting. That's the turn. Everything from here isn't desperation, it's escalation. Over the next several years, Jenkins wrote almost 900 fraudulent checks, using his access to sign off in the bakery president's name. And the money didn't sit in a bank account. It went out fast, and it went out loud. A vacation property in Santa Fe, New Mexico, worth roughly $658,000. 38 vehicles over the life of the scheme. Hundreds of watches, hundreds of pieces of jewelry. Over 200 private jet trips. And on a single American Express black card, the couple spent more than $11 million, about $98,000 a month. At one Neiman Marcus location alone, over $1 million. Set all of that against his real salary, about $50,000 a year. On paper, filed on his own tax return year after year, a number that never came close to explaining any of it. And here's where the second half of this story becomes almost hard to believe. While all of this was happening, the bakery itself was struggling. Financials declining, layoffs, restructuring, and management, the McNutts, the people who'd built this company, were genuinely mystified. They couldn't figure out why a business that hadn't fundamentally changed was suddenly bleeding money. The answer was sitting 3 doors down the hall, reconciling his own accounts every month. Bob McNutt was looking directly at the evidence of his own theft, in the form of numbers that didn't add up, and he didn't see it. Not because he wasn't paying attention, because he was still trusting the one person whose job it was to hide it. It wasn't a whistleblower. It wasn't an outside audit, or a suspicious vendor, or a tip to the police. It was something almost mundane. In the summer of 2013, while Jenkins happened to be out of town, another employee, someone who normally wouldn't have touched this task, reconciled the bank account he usually handled himself, and the numbers didn't match. By late June of 2013, Jenkins had been fired. The bakery brought in local police, and it wasn't long before the FBI took over. Those cars from the opening of this video, that's where they were headed. Jenkins pleaded guilty to mail fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and making false statements to a financial institution. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. His wife, Kay, who investigators said was aware of and benefited from the spending, received probation, community service, and a court order to personally write an apology to the bakery she'd helped drain. Of the $16 to $17 million taken, only a fraction, around $4 million, was ever recovered, in property and cash. And the bakery? It survived. Collins Street Bakery is still there today, still shipping fruitcakes across the world every winter. A small-town institution that came within one overlooked bank reconciliation of losing everything. This wasn't a criminal mastermind. It was a small town's trust, stretched further than it could hold. It was an owner who stopped watching his own business because watching felt like the opposite of trusting the people he loved. And it was one man, alone with the numbers, who spent 9 years building a case in his own head for why what he was taking wasn't really theft at all. Somewhere in this story, there's a version where it never happens. A moment where a second signature, a routine check, one uncomfortable question, would have been enough. That's what we're looking for in every case on this channel. Not just what someone stole, but the exact moment it would have still been fixable.